welcome everybody back to Wovenwings Live, where we bring you wisdom and tools for vibrant living. I'm Gabe Crane. I'm joined by my co-host Rahul Didwania. And if you enjoy listening to us, please share our show with a friend or leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can join our newsletter, which is linked in the show description, to follow along the journey. And today we are continuing our resonance mini-series. We've had the last 2 episodes. The name of our show today is Facilitating Broader Change, the Ecology of Resonance.
I'm curious, if that lands with you, or like how you would look at it from like a resonance perspective.
Yeah, one thing that this whole topic has made me think about is one of my teacher's books. So Arnie Mindell, who's one of the founders of Process Work, he has a really amazing book called Sitting in the Fire. One of the big things he talks about in that book is that we need to sit in the fire, not literally in the fire. There are times when we have to escape the fire and get away from the physical fires, but that in this deeper sense, there is this fire burning in the world, and kind of what we are generally always doing is like trying to get away from it. We're trying to avoid it. We are trying to be comfortable. We are trying to make things easy and forget about it. But it's there, it's burning, and as we do that, it gets bigger. It actually has more of the capacity to do more harm the more that we try to avoid it. And so what he talks about in that book is the real work of placing ourselves on the chopping block, so to speak, being willing to face the very difficult challenges and complexities that are part of life, and in a way let ourselves get devoured by them.
And so I'm curious, Gabe, if you can take us deeper into what does that mean? What does it mean to sit in the fire? What does it look like? And, is it just you do it and then you magically come out on the other side and you're connected more deeply to something or the other? Or like, what is that exactly?
I think it's an ongoing process. So it's really an orientation, and it's an attitude that we take towards life. And I think that, what is it that I want to say here? I think usually the tension is painful and tricky, and we have this innate desire to avoid it. We kind of have talked about, on the one hand, I kind of painted these 2 versions of that before. One is to ignore it. I think the other extreme is guilt. I think that we are also seeing that a lot in our culture at this point, is kind of this heaviness. Life is about being happy. Life is about being in a light state. It's not good to be heavy like that. It's not good to be burdened with this guilt and this like kind of overwhelming sense of inescapable, dread. Being of lightness, of being in a good state, so to speak, of being musical about our life, being resonant with our life, while being very conscious of all these dynamics, not turning a blind eye to that. Many others, I think, it's really about how do we allow these elements of life to actually enter into our consciousness, to be present, and treat them with compassion, with love, with grace, and actually listen to them, not just kind of brush them off or say you're just angry, but actually allow ourselves to be moved and changed by them.
What does that really mean, right? That sounds like you're not taking the issue seriously enough. I don't know. I feel like that person or that archetype would still not really get what you're saying. And I'm wondering what your response to that would be.
Well, I think that when we go into this process, and we think about being facilitators, and whether you're like formally facilitating, or we can all be facilitators of our home life, of what's going on at work, in our communities, whatever it is, when we kind of take that seat, when we make that choice, I think part of what happens is we move out of this, like bit by bit, the more we contemplate this, we move out of this kind of more judging mind of like that there's some sort of right way to go about this and a wrong way to go about this, and that some people are doing it right and some are not. I think it starts to bring us into like the recognition that like, hey, well, everyone is where they are for a variety of different reasons. And actually, instead of passing that judgment, I can share that compassion and love with them and appreciate, not just in like a kind of top down, like I'm somehow above you or more knowledgeable in some way, but rather like, wow, like I can just appreciate the reality of your experience and I can respect it. And I think when we start to do that, these principles, these inner principles that we're talking about are really, they are universal. They're self-similar across the board.
Something else, right, that goes into it. And I get all this feels abstract, but at the same time, it feels very real, to me, just talking about it. And I can like envision it, right? It's like, hey, when I'm in that place, it just, all that happens naturally.
I mean, it's a state that is very much, it's just right there for all of us in the present moment. We're always doing one or the other along a spectrum. What voice are you following? That are you identifying with in your head that's constructing your sense of who you are and what you're making of this conversation? And what sort of quality is there? And where does it lead you? Creativity is also something that begins to emerge from resonance.
Things can get uncomfortable, and that, we sometimes run away from it, or it triggers certain responses in us. But if we can just be with it, if we can just connect with what's there, allow ourselves to process it, and then emanate from there, that through the connective fabric of our lives, of the world, because everything's connected, that has positive change.
I appreciate your transparency, because I think that if you follow our show and listen to this, it's what we're really working to do. We want to provide you with valuable ideas and wisdom, tools, all this, but we're also really trying to support you through listening to this back into a more aware relationship with yourself, that the world is a complex place, and that if we really want to make a difference and have a better world or even a viable world for our children and grandchildren, this is something that we really all need to be engaging in as much as we possibly can.